we have the privilege to sit with Billy McFarland. Billy, thank you. So Shabazz can't be sitting here today because of legal, issues. But just a little brief on you guys. You guys were cellies, I think it was a couple years ago. Correct me if I'm wrong now, Billy.
Yeah, it's crazy. There were a lot of people pitching ideas during my 4 years in prison, and Baz was the one guy who every day was working on a great business plan, and to come out and see him actually build Studio 424 so quickly has been incredible, and I'm really shocked and blown away. So really cool to see the space for the first time live here in video, and great to meet you as well. But awesome what you guys have accomplished so quickly, and really incredible to see all the good he's been able to build for Chicago creators in such a short period of time.
It's crazy too, because I was telling him too, it's open for like, I think a month officially, which is phenomenal. But he did tell me,
congrats. Hell yeah.
Yeah, for sure. But he did tell me a lot about you guys being cellies too as well. So everyone knows who you are already, right? So I don't want to ask questions that you've already been interviewed with, but it's actually fascinating because both of you guys had a dream and you guys executed, which is phenomenal, right? A lot of people don't even start. It just becomes an idea and it stays there. But you and Shabazz actually, brought your dreams into reality. And I wanted to touch topics more on that, right? Because this podcast is to educate people, what an LLC is, how to educate how to start a business, how to get investors, how to invest, right? And that's what you did. So I'm 24 years old. And I know that you wanted to start Fyre Fest around that age, right? You were around that age when that executed.
Yeah, correct? I was 24 in the middle of the run up to Fyre Festival. So life goes fast, right?
Times 3-4 years ago, of the vid. I don't really want to say but I wanted to touch topics on that. So when you were starting doing the Fyre Fest, how did that happen for the festival? Because I know you can't just trust a early 20-year-old with all that money. So what was in your mind, and what did you know about like the legal issues, like permits? Did you know about that? And if you did, how did you execute it to make Fyre, the Fyre Festival?
I think the biggest misconception is that we woke up one day with the idea for this grand festival with all this talent on this beautiful island, and the whole world kind of came to us. And the reality couldn't be further from the truth. It took years of small wins and dozens of small failures along the way to build up the network and the trust and the access and the people and even like the exposure that made Fyre Festival as an idea at least come to fruition. Ultimately, I think that was the worst part of what I did too, was violating the trust of a lot of people who had backed me for a number of years. But ultimately, the good and bad that came out of it was due to these years of winning and losing on a small scale until the momentum was created so that such a big thing could potentially happen or not happen. So yeah, I think entrepreneurs need to realize that you just can't like do it all on day one, and it just takes years of little wins and little failures first.
Well, that's the thing. So like when you were in high school too, did you know that you wanted to do business, or how did you pivot to, the entrepreneurship? Because a lot of people don't know what they want to do.
Started my first company in 6th grade, had 3 full-time employees in 7th grade. And that was going really well until one of my full-time employees sent me an invitation to my parents' house and inviting me to his wedding. And they were asking me why this grown man was inviting me to his wedding. So that got shut down pretty quickly. But yeah, I had been running businesses since I was 12 or 13. And then during my freshman year of college, became one of the youngest people to ever raise venture capital and left school to work on my first like venture capital backed business. So there were these like 10 years pre-Fyre that allowed all the good and all the bad, obviously, that came to with Fyre to actually happen.
Initially, when you were starting this concept, you had help along the way. So what was it like to establish a team? A lot of people, that's the biggest thing, having a team. Yeah, it's not a solo thing to do. You can't have a one army thing to make this festival happen and all these other businesses. So I wanted to ask you, what is a good advice to start picking people right, correctly to trust, and how to market yourself so people can start saying, you know what, he might be young, but I trust him enough to invest in him,
Sure. So I think going back to that question, the first thing that most investors will ask an early stage startup is, who's the team? Because ultimately, like, ideas change, markets change, products change, but the team is who the team is. And ultimately, people are investing in people at these really early stages. So easy to say, hard to do, right? And like ultimately, it is very hard, but it'll most likely determine your success by your ability to surround yourself with 3 or 4 other excellent entrepreneurs to build alongside.
That's actually an excellent question, because I know 10 years ago when you started this, social media was just starting.
Yeah.
So now, since like, correct me if I'm wrong, you're going to do a Fyre Festival in part 2, no? Part dos?
We are, yes. So next year, but working on it now. Full steam ahead.
There you go. So now, since social media is in full effect, right? Now, TikTok, all this stuff, WhatsApp, Feet Finder, Grinder, whatever. JK. But
yeah.
How is it going to be different promoting this stuff, marketing, and now having the legal permits to do it now? How are you going to approach this and, market this event? Vice versa.
That's a really good question.
10 years ago.
Yeah. So I think the famous marketing campaign of Fyre Festival 1, if you don't remember, was this orange tile campaign where we had 400 influencers post this ambiguous orange tile at exactly the same time on Instagram. Mm-hmm. And the idea was you would see your favorite comedian, favorite music artist, favorite athlete, favorite model, whoever they may be, all posting this together. And you didn't understand what the relationship was between these people. So it led you to investigate, and that investigation would lead to, Fyre Festival. I think social media has changed a lot since then. I think back then there were a small number of people who had massive number of followers, and it dropped off very quickly after that. Now there are far more creators. I think influence is more democratized amongst like a much large number of people. So just having 400 people post now won't have the same effect that it did 7 years ago. So I think that's a challenge for us, and something we're trying to put together and build towards now, with how to market with these new mass market micro influencers who are probably controlling buying and spending just as well as the big guys did 7 years ago.
That's a phenomenal answer. So you're 34 right now. Correct me if I'm wrong, Billy, right?
32.
You're 32. So 4 years ago when you were with, you're not old. I'm 24, just, but when you were in prison with Shabazz, I'm assuming you guys, I heard 18 months, correct? So you guys
are correct. Yep.
Yeah. So sparking all these ideas, in the middle of COVID, when you were in those 4 walls, what did you tell yourself, saying like, hey, like I could have done this correctly, I could have done this better? What's one thing that you think that could have changed everything, that could have made Fyre Festival work?
I think honesty. I became very desperate to try to pull off the festival. I think the first non-illegal mistake was making the festival 4 months after this viral trailer marketing campaign came out. It was just practically impossible to build a city on a remote island in 4 months. I didn't realize that. But I think like the next mistake was, instead of admitting that I was wrong and that, hey, we probably need a year or 18 months instead of 4 months, I lied to investors to try to raise more money, thinking that additional capital could cover up for my management flaws. I think in reality, people knew I was lying, and that probably scared away capital and help. And if I just told the truth, being like, hey guys, I fucked up, we just did the best marketing campaign of all time, but we need 18 months, I would have attracted the best possible people to actually help me make it a Reality. So ironically, the lies I thought would make money easier made money harder, and ended up becoming the downfall of the whole festival.
I mean, how long did it take you to raise all that money? And how much money did you raise?
We raised just under 30 million, around 30 million for Fyre Festival over 4 months. It was a pretty quick time period.
4 months. Okay. What permits did you need to do to make Fyre Festival happen?
A lot. So we were a large team. I think the day of the festival, we had 800 people working on Fyre and Fyre Festival. 800. So it was a massive team. So I was never the festival expert, so it'd be hard to give you proper answers about like what permits were called or weren't called. But yeah, we certainly had a huge organization working to pull it off.
So it's just like I have so many questions, but I know you always get advice of entrepreneurship and how to start like certain businesses. So if you were 18 right off the bat, right? I'm going to ask you this question. If you were 18, had no funding, right? And was not going to go to college, what would you do to start raising capital?
I think funding now is so much less important than it was when I was starting 14 years ago. Software has become so much cheaper. The access to information has become so much easier.
Hmm.
All these social networks, like Twitter is amazing, right? You can meet incredible people and partner up and find people to help fill your deficiencies for free. I think it's just become so much cheaper and faster to build online products or communities or whatever maybe they're going towards. So I wouldn't worry about raising capital. I'd worry about one thing, that's getting your first customer. Like customers are the most important thing. And you can build something very cheaply now. And if you can find one person who wants to buy it, you have a viable business. And then how do you get your second customer, your fifth, your 10th, your 20th, et cetera? So I think customers are the new investors, right? And like investors aren't needed for most businesses that a young person can go and start themselves online.
That's actually really true. Everything that, entrepreneurship, people mistake it. Like I said earlier in this interview, a lot of people just come up with this idea, but don't execute it because they're scared to actually start. Or, I always hear the saying, scared money doesn't make no money, right? Because you got this
Yeah.
pool of money, but you don't know how to invest it because everyone just puts it in one basket. And I'm asking you these questions because I have a lot of friends and also me myself being, early 20s, mid 20s of how to approach entrepreneurship if I were to start a business and all this stuff. Um, Correct me if I'm wrong, also too, you came from a background where, you weren't handed everything correctly. Like you still had to, make some money to like fund yourself and, buy certain things, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I had my first business in sixth grade. So I was
Sixth grade.
basically generating revenue then. And then, left college at 19 and supported myself in my first business, like first real venture backed business. I think the biggest thing that stops people from starting a company is that they predict all these future problems that they're like, oh, well, even if I do X, Y, and Z in 12 months, this is going to happen. And then we're going to be screwed. And in reality, most of the problems that you foresee end up solving themselves before you get there. So people like don't take this first step because of some imaginary problem when in reality, that problem likely would never be a problem if they just took action. So like no one's going to do it for you, right? Like you just got to take that step and things solve themselves.
100%. You have to perform regardless how you feel. So you're so driven. That's what I'm saying. Like you're so driven, even after what everything happened. Who's like one of your role models and like what installed that in your head to keep going, being like, Billy, I fail right now, but I'm gonna pick myself up and I'm gonna keep going, right? I want to
I
start
think it was
by
the, yeah.
I want to start by like when you were 18 though. Like when you were like right out of college to keep going to pursue that.
I think it was the like listen, like most days suck, right? You're eating shit, you're being told no, uh people are denying you. It's like it's hard to make your first couple of dollars. It's hard to survive when you're first starting. I think what kind of kept me going were these moments of like wow and realization that the world isn't exactly what it was when we were taught when we were in grade school, right? And like ultimately it's up to us to dictate where or what our life turns out to be. And I kept finding myself in different rooms or different meetings or in different places with people who I could only have dreamed of meeting years before. And I think those one-off moments, whether it's every 3 months or 6 months, or like that was the entrepreneur's high, where it's like, hey, like I got myself here and I met someone incredible who was really smart, or I got this great customer who I never could have dreamed of meeting before. Like those moments kind of carried the momentum and provided the next carrot to really run toward to try to accomplish.
That's insane. And right now to, 32, you're still a young man. What's keeping you going and what's like the outcome that you want to, what's something that you want to conquer in life right now? 32, you still have another 40 years. So like what's the end goal for Billy, you know?
I think that for better or worse, I have a really clear goal, which is paying people back from Fyre One. And I
Mm.
think what's been fun is that we are doing so by actually executing Fyre properly. So what I love about this is one, I pay everybody back that I owe, which is my life goal. But two, is actually get to execute the initial vision of Fyre Festival, which is bringing these different people together through amazing experiences. So I can do what I love and then ultimately fulfill my purpose of making things right. So I think it's kind of a really great opportunity that I have and super grateful for.
Great, man. So when you were in Shabazz and, when you guys were Sellies, did you ever guys like pitch each other ideas? Like, hey, like you should do this, we should do this, we should do business together. Like, you're in there for, 24 hours a day.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that one of the hardest parts of prison is being on the sideline. Um, it's very rare for someone to have 4 or 5 or 6 years, whatever it is, in the prime of their working career where they're basically told you can't do anything.
Mm.
So it's kind of this weird feeling where you're like, I should be working right now, right? And I should be supporting myself. I should be supporting my family. I should be helping others. I should be doing something impactful, but you can't. So it's like this weird mixed emotions where you have all these ideas and all these concepts, but you have to kind of reconcile that with the fact that you did something wrong and I did something really wrong, right? And I need to serve my punishment to, atone for those mistakes.
Well, that's why I asked that question, because I'm just like, you guys came from two different backgrounds, correct? So, but
Mhm.
ended up at the same spot. So at some point, something went wrong in that timeline, what you guys were trying to pursue. So now, since now you're out, and when you were doing 18 months with Shabazz, obviously your whole team, left, right?
For
There's no
sure. Yeah.
team to have. So having that in your head while being in prison, what was your what did you do differently to pick the right people to be back on your team once you left prison, right? After all that thinking.
That's a really, really good question. And I think that I found excitement pre-prison with Fyre One of always being surrounded by a large number of people. Like I love the fact that there were hundreds of employees. I love the fact that our office was buzzing 24/7 with people in and out. And I think I was sacrificing deep relationships for a lot of really surface level relationships. And one of the biggest positives of prison was really focusing on a small number of people who you just become much closer with, and like having 5 or 6 really deep relationships rather than 100 associates. So I think that was one of the redeeming qualities of it, and it's keeping those like 5 people tight and really like trusting them to kind of help in life, whether it's advice, guidance, personal, business, etc. Having that like tight core group is just so much more fulfilling and also more effective than having a large number of whatever transactional relationships.
That too, because like you have a lot of mouth to feed, right? If you have a bigger team, you don't even know where the money's going to if you don't have a good fundamental core team, right? When all this money's coming in.
And the
I
values
always
get lost along, like it becomes a telephone game, right? Like if you're not being true to yourself and everybody's kind of just like there, the values get lost along the way. Or if you have a really core nucleus who all believe in the same thing and are all in it for the right reason, like that permeates throughout the rest of the organization.
sure the money goes missing, right?
Yeah,
But
exactly.
but anyways, so everyone says they're scared of debt, right? I'm scared of debt. That person's scared of
Mhm.
debt. But I feel like people get it very confused. Debt can be good. This is what I hear, and sometimes in certain podcasts. And saying this, asking you, is debt being in debt good? And if so, how is it good?
Is being in debt good?
Yeah.
Oh, uh, tough question. I think I'm in just like such a ridiculous amount of debt. I don't know how much I owe total, 30 something million dollars, right? Where it's like it becomes more of just like numbers on a screen at this point, and it dramatically impacts your life because everything I earn, a significant portion has to go back to these various buckets. So it sucks and it's a tax, but it's a tax that it's a hole that I dug for myself. Um, I think ultimately though, it shouldn't be an excuse, right? Like anybody can always find an excuse for why they're not doing more. Oh, I'm in debt. I can't afford this. My credit card's maxed out. At the end of the day, it's all bullshit. Like no one is stopping you from making something or being impactful than yourself. All these third party restrictions or obligations, your kids, your parents, your family, your credit card bill, like doesn't fucking matter. Like that's just like we all have shit to deal with and we all have different stuff, but that's not going to stop you from actually building something great.
I'm telling you, speaking with you, just this is like really the drive that you have, the motivation and all that, just the words out your mouth coming out. You have so much motivation, so much power off of it. So this is a joke. You're like Jordan Belfort in festivals. Jordan Belfort's actually 110 million, so that if that kind of helps. But
Yeah, that sucks.
I know.
But
I
once
just
again, hasn't stopped him, right? He's gone on to live a good life. So they're
There
yeah.
you go. Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. There you go. That's why, and you're another story too. So if someone does become in debt, they can still have a plan to execute and still live a fulfillment, to fulfill their dream and their ongoing dream. And that's what you're doing right now with Fyre Fest 2. So,
Correct.
Billy, I ask you this right now at 32, what is something that you're just like, I could have done differently when I was like doing the Fyre Festival? I know that question, I feel like it sounds repetitive,
Yeah.
but what's something that you could have done actually to tweak, something realistic that you could have done to execute that? Obviously the 4 month period's, not realistic and you were just a kid at that time. But what's something that you feel like when you were on that island you could have done differently to make it work? Because
As a
when
young, yeah, it's a great question again. I think as a young
Thank you.
entrepreneur, I constantly felt the need to pretend like I had everything under control and that I knew it all. And in reality, the most established, 6-year-old business person still doesn't have everything figured out, right? And they have 1,000 employees for a reason because they're not the best at everything and they can't do it all themselves. And I was scared to kind of show kinks in the armor and admit to my investors and my team members or my employees or my advisors that, hey, I need help. Like, I don't know how to build a city, or I don't know how to do this. And I think by trying to cover things up, pretend like I knew what I was doing, I pushed away a lot of people who were actually eager to help, and probably pushed away a lot of new potential partners who are like, hey, like, this is too good to be true. Like, why is he not, showing us what's really going on? Why is he not admitting the areas where there are weaknesses, or there are flaws? So I think the one lesson here for young entrepreneurs is you aren't supposed to know everything. It's like, be great at what you're great at, and then very quickly admit where you suck and be upfront about it and get help in those areas. And that's how you'll attract the best possible people.
So what's one of the most difficult thing being an entrepreneur?
When I had to fire my first full-time employee, I think that was like a moment I'll never forget. I think it's hard to deliver bad news in those early days, and that was tough.
So now doing Fyre Fest 2, now you have the right team, you have the right funding, and now everything's way better than it was, 14 years ago, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Moving on forward, when is that going to be executed? When do you plan to execute that? And when do you start promoting it?
Sure. So once again, the goal of Fyre 2 is to, one, pay back people who are owed from Fyre Festival 1, and then also excitingly is to like actually execute properly the vision of Fyre Festival 1. And I think the biggest difference this time is we're giving ourselves time, and two, it's not like just me leading the ship. There's a third-party festival company who specializes and just does festivals full time, who's actually in charge. Then I'm focused more on like the marketing and the adventure and the activity aspect of the festival.
And this is another question because everyone's curious about this, and I'm curious too as well. So when we were talking about Jordan Belfort, he's still living a lavish life, even though he's still like over $100 million in debt. So how would that work when you're paying off all the money that you owe? What percentage goes to the people that lost the money, and then what percentage goes to you? And how does that work? Like the court orders that?
I think it's probably different for every person's case. So I'm not sure what a situation is. And there may or may not be time limits to certain people. I don't know. I think everybody's unique. I think for me, it's pretty stifling. Like, a pretty significant percentage of my income goes back to people that are owed. So, can't afford what I would like to afford based on my income, obviously, because a lot of it has to go back to those people who are owed. But hopefully in 5 or 7 years, people are paid back and I can live more freely. But it's definitely a long road to get there.
What are the advantages you have now that you didn't, besides experience, that you didn't have 10 years ago?
I think failing is really valuable, and like just knowing how bad things can go wrong is probably the best sanity check for all future decisions. Because like when you haven't failed dramatically, you don't know how bad things could be. You just like, you don't know how bad things could be. Right.
Yeah.
And I think at least like knowing what the worst possible outcome is like a great way to like reflect and stop and think for all kind of decisions going on right now.
Failing. So now, since you're more experienced, I feel like you welcome failing, of course, because I feel like failing, it's the only way you can learn. And someone like myself, not myself, because I know failing, I've failed money many, 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 many times. But what is something to overcome that failure, the fear of failing?
It's a good question. I think the one thing that probably Shabazz and I saw is that a lot of people who are in prison failed very badly, right? And a lot of them failed in illegal and dishonest and immoral ways, and that's not okay, but they did. And like, I was certainly one of them. I think it's really hard to come back from that extreme failure. I think people who have small failures, it provides almost like momentum and desire and ambition. But people who have big failures, it kills ambition because you get so scared of what position you're in and being there again. So it's tough, right? I don't really know if there's an answer to it, but that's why I've been so impressed by Studio 424, right? Like, after succumbing to a failure where you're taking 5 years away from you and your family, to come back so quickly and to build something, I think that's something that 99.9% of people who have gone through a similar failure won't be able to do. And that's really, really impressive.
Well, that's what I told Shabazz at the time. I'm just like, he got released from prison, executed this, because he did this same place. He already had this place back in the early 2000s, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm going to share, I'm sharing his story too. He got in trouble because of drug trafficking and all that other stuff. Like I said, both you guys had the same dream, same goal, same vision, not the same thing, but you guys wanted to make your dreams into reality. But somewhere along the way, you guys messed up. And but Shabazz, even though doing I think around like 5, 6 years, I'm gonna edit this to if I'm wrong. He still made this happen, right? So he's another story that I like because you, Shabazz, and then other entrepreneurs, us new generation, early young folks, young people, we see that, and I feel like you're like one of my motivators too. You and many other people, it's just like even if I do fail, even if I do become in debt or whatever, I can still have another option to continue, right? It's all mindset, and I feel like
It's
you
all,
had,
absolutely. It's all mindset, right? And it's
yeah,
realizing where you went wrong, understanding how you could get help and rectify that, and then also realizing what you're good at. I think Shabazz is a great example of he's really great at bringing people together. He's great at actually executing a plan. He's great at taking that first step and getting people excited. And that's a hard part of life, right? So like focusing on that and then getting help in other areas, that's the recipe for success.
do you think, just another question, do you think you and Shabazz would ever do business together? And if so, what would it
Uh,
be,
I will
hypothetically?
definitely be when I am finished with probation. I'll definitely become a member of Studio 424. So
Let's
it'll be my
go.
home base when I'm in Chicago for sure.
Let's go. I can't wait for that because so we can meet like personal face to face. Because this is my first Zoom. And I was telling him this interview, I like to do face to face. It's more personal, more vulnerable.
Yeah, you're doing great, but yeah, like face to face, definitely the best.
Will be great. But also to like another questions apart side of the entrepreneurship. I heard you're doing a celebrity fight. Is that correct, or what's
Yeah,
going on with that?
I have a kickboxing fight. What's today? In 8 days. So next week, May 30th. Uh,
Either.
I'm fighting some crypto influencer. So hopefully we'll get a quick knockout there. But no, in all seriousness, literally fighting to help pay people back.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, trying to eat my own dog food there.
Well, on the podcast right now, Street Dreams. What round do you predict you're gonna beat him? Because I'm gonna put my money on you, man.
I'll win by a left knee in the second round.
Left knee, second round. Well, we're hearing it right now here first. Do you think you're gonna still continue that, like keep doing kickboxing, or are you just gonna try this for like whatever?
I think after I win this one, I will call somebody else out at the post-fight interview.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, so I think it's like a good stepping stone towards the next round.
It's good marketing too. And also I saw you also on the Nelk Boys podcast, and this is where I first heard it, that you started Pirate, right? Or
Yeah,
what's
so I have Pirate, which is basically a marketing agency. So we
uh-huh.
work with a number of venture-backed startups to help them get attention and users for their apps. So I spend around half my time doing Pirate and half my time working on Fyre and other Fyre-related media activities.
So how many businesses do you have?
Really have Fyre and Pirate. So Pirate, once again, it's the marketing side. Then Fyre's the music festival. We're doing a TV show. It's other kind of marketing initiatives. So really the two companies and obviously different ventures going on beneath each brand.
At 32 right now, how many businesses can you run? I don't know if that's a good question or like a real structured question. Like if I had, 15 million laying around, how many
Yeah.
businesses would it take for me to be successful?
I
Or
think if you look at like the most successful people, at least financially, it was almost always because of one thing. So I
yeah,
think this whole like diversification concept like doesn't really work, and you should put all of your eggs in one basket and like try to nail your one thing.
that is true. And where is Fire 2 Dos gonna be hosted? You think it's gonna be
It's
here in
it's going to be
Chicago?
in the Caribbean.
Ah,
My partners are doing site visits in the next couple of weeks. We have like 4 or 5 final locations. So
oh, that's dope.
yeah, we'll be announcing everything this summer. So pretty excited to get that locked down, finally announce the dates, and get this cooking.
I'm assuming it's gonna be a fire lineup, huh? Because I'm Mexican, so and yeah, I better see Peso Pluma, Junior H, all those people over there, man.
Understood. It'll certainly be a mix of genres, and it's not just music too. We'll have like extreme sports, we'll have comedy, we'll have fashion, and just trying to bring it all together.
I mean, Billy, I didn't want to take up most of your time because I know you're a busy man, but I feel like one day I really hope you come here to Studio 424 and we can actually have a podcast face to face in person and we can include Shabazz. Um,
I'd love
and
to. That'd be amazing.
it'll be a phenomenal. And hopefully, we will run into each other and we can do an actual interview so we can actually, talk it up, chop it up because it's actually cool. You're a really cool guy, man. You're a really cool guy. Like I actually genuinely mean that, Billy. I wanted to say, do you have any questions for us? Any questions for me? Before we wrap this up.
It was great to meet you, and just really want to congratulate you guys. It's insane to see how good the space looks and how fast it came together. I'm jealous by your operational abilities, and I can't wait to visit you guys soon. So congratulations, and we'll be at Studio 424 sooner rather than later.
Let's go, Billy. Thank you, Billy, so much for hopping on the first episode of Street Dreams Podcast. Shout out Shabazz. Thank you. And obviously, I don't know if you want to shout out your socials. That's what I usually do on my page, but I feel like everyone knows your socials. But where would you want people to find you and what sites to visit?
Yeah, sure. At Pirate Billy, PYRT Billy. And thanks again, guys. Appreciate to be here.
Thank you, Billy.